Hello, students. Welcome to the online class once more. Today we are going to start a new story. The name of the story is Weathering the Storm in Arsama, written by Hers Mander. It is a story based on a real cyclone that hit Orissa in October 1999. A note is given. Let me read out the note to you. The cyclone that hit Orissa in October 1999 killed thousands of people and devastated hundreds of villages. For 2 dreadful nights, Prasant, a young man, was marooned on the roof of a house. On the third day, he decided to go to his village. Did he find his family? So, students, it is about a young man who had to stay on the roof of a house for 2 days due to a cyclone that hit the state of Orissa. Students, here, maroon means left trapped. Trapped, you know, is to get into a situation or in a place where one cannot find any way out. On the third day, he decided to go to his village. Let us see in the story whether he could go to his home or not. I'll be reading the paragraphs followed by explanation. On 27 October 1999, 7 years after his mother's death, Prasad had gone to the block headquarters of Arsama, a small town in coastal Orissa, some 18 kilometers from his village, to spend the day with a friend. In the evening, a dark and a menacing storm quickly gathered. Winds beat against the houses with a speed and fury that Prasad had never witnessed before. Heavy and incessant rain filled the darkness. Ancient trees were uprooted and crashed to the earth. Screams rent the air as people and houses were swiftly washed away. The angry waters swirled into his friend's house, neck deep. The building was of brick and mortar and was strong enough to survive the devastation of the wind's velocity of 350 km per hour. But the cold terror of the family grew with the crashing of trees that had got uprooted and fallen on their house sometime in the middle of the night, damaging its roof and walls. Explanation. Students, do you remember the elements of a story like settings, characters, plot, subplot, etc.? Here we find it. The setting of this particular story is 1999, 27 October, a time when the state of Orissa was hit by a super cyclone with a speed of 350 kilometers per hour. That is the settings. And the place here is Arshama, a small town in coastal Orissa. And the first character we find is Prasant, a young man. Prasant lived in a village in Orissa. After the death of his mother, he had been staying there for 7 years. On 27th of October 1999, he decided to go to one of his friend's house, which was 18 kilometers away from his village. After reaching his friend's house, something very terrible happened in the evening on that particular day. A dark storm gathered very quickly, and strong winds with a speed of 350 kilometers per hour started blowing. Continuous heavy rainfall filled the ground, and the trees were being uprooted and crashed onto the earth. People started screaming as they found their houses being washed away swiftly. Students, can you imagine? It was a storm with a speed of 350 kilometers per hour. The next paragraph. The crazed destruction wrought by the cyclone and the surge of the ocean continued for the next 36 hours. Although the wind speeds had reduced somewhat by the next morning. To escape the waters rising in the house, Prasant and his friend's family had taken refuge on the roof. Prasant will never forget the shock he experienced at his first glimpse of the devastation wrought by the supercyclone in the grey light of the early morning. A raging, deadly brown sheet of water covered everything as far as the eye could see. Only fractured cement houses still stood in a few places. Bloated animals, carcasses, and human corpses floated in every direction. All round, even huge old trees had fallen. Two coconut trees had fallen on the roof of their house. This was a blessing in disguise because the tender coconuts from the trees kept the trapped family from starving in the several days that followed. Explanation. The storm grew bigger and bigger, and it lasted for the next 36 hours. But the speed of the wind had slowed down. That was by the next morning when everything was visible to all. Prasant and his friend's family, where he wanted to stay the night, went through a nightmare and had to take refuge on the roof because everything was devastated and destroyed by the super cyclone. A very horrible scene was created. Everywhere it was water, water, and water. It seemed as if all the places were covered with a brown sheet of water. There were broken houses made of cement, and all the other houses were carried away by the water. And The most terrible and horrible scene was that the water also carried dead bodies of animals and even human beings. Huge trees remained fallen and floating on the water, and it was really a very terrible scene all around. But a good thing happened for Prashant and his friend's family, that a coconut tree had fallen on their roof, which had some soft coconuts that would help them to sustain for some time or for some days, because whatever food was there in their house remained rotten or in water, which could not be taken. So it was a good news for them that at least for some days they could feed themselves the soft coconuts fallen on the roof. Next paragraph. For the next 2 days, Prasad sat huddled with his friend's family in the open on the rooftop. They froze in the cold and incessant rain. The rainwater washed away Prasad's tears. The only thought that flashed through his mind was whether his family had survived the fury of the super cyclone. Was he to be bereaved once again? Explanation. It was really a very hard time for everyone. Prasad and his friend's family remained on the rooftop for the next 2 days. The destructions and the sufferings of the people all around dried up Prasad from inside. Now his tears seemed to have been washed away by the waters of the flood. This is a very symbolic implication that the destruction was huge and now no one could even weep or cry. Everyone was in the same condition. But Prasad was wary and concerned. Now he was thinking about his own family. A thought came to his mind: if his family members had survived this terrible super cyclone in his own village. He was frightened by the thought that it could be a bad news also for him. In other words, he feared if the family members of his own family were alive. So, next paragraph. 2 days later, which seemed to Prasad like 2 years, the rain ceased and the rainwater slowly began to recede. Prasad was determined to seek out his family without further delay. But the situation was still dangerous, and his friend's family pleaded with Prasad to stay back a little while longer. But Prasad knew he had to go. Students, so we find that Prasad and his friend's family were in deep trouble. But there was good news. In the following 2 days, the rain stopped and the rain waters slowly began to decrease. Now Prasad thought that he should go, and he decided to go to his own village to find his family members. whether they were fine or something wrong had happened to them. The friends, family members requested Prasan to stay a bit longer there so that everything was well, and then he should start for his village. But Prasant did not listen to them because he thought that it would be very late for his family members. So he decided to go to his own village. The next paragraph. He equipped himself with a long, sturdy stick and then started on his 18 kilometers expedition back to his village through the swollen flood waters. It was a journey he would never forget. He constantly had to use his stick to locate the road, to determine where the water was most shallow. At places it was waist deep and progress was slow. At several points he lost the road and had to swim. After some distance he was relieved to find two friends of his uncle who were also returning to their village. They decided to move ahead together. Explanation. Students, here a description of how Prasad was trying to go back to his village is given. So, what was the preparation Prasad had done? He was equipped with a long, sturdy stick. That means he took a long, strong stick so that he could find his way out through waters to his village. It was a long journey of 18 kilometers from his friend's house. He never would forget this expedition in his life. It was a very difficult journey. He had to constantly use his stick to locate the road. That means he had to use his stick to find out whether it was the road he was walking on or some other place. And he also used his stick to determine whether it was shallow or deep water. So Prasant was slowly and steadily moving forward towards his village. At some point, he also found that it was really deep water all around. It could be up to his waist, and sometimes he found it was all right, and sometimes he had to swim as well. But there was a good news for Prasant. After covering a distance, he found two of his uncle's friends, and he was relieved that they were also moving towards the same village. So they decided to go together to their village. That was a very good sign for Prasant because now he was not alone. He was with two of the friends of his uncle. So altogether they were three persons moving back to their village. Next paragraph. As they waded through the water, the scenes they witnessed grew more and more macabre. They had to push away many human bodies, men, women, children, and carcasses of dogs, goats, and cattle that the current swept against them as they moved ahead. In every village that they passed, they could barely see a house standing. Prasant now wept out loud and long. He was sure that his family could not have survived this catastrophe. Explanation. So, students, WAD, WADE. WAD means to walk difficultly through water, and macabre means a feeling of fear, particularly for death. So, as he tried to walk difficultly through water, there he saw a scene that was frightening one. They saw that dead bodies of men, women, and children were floating on water and being carried away by the water of the flood. As they moved on, there was no sign of any house. They could not make out which place they were crossing. However, they kept on moving forward. And then Prasant was very much frightened. He loudly cried out, thinking that it was doubtful whether he would get his family members alive, and thought that they could be either dead or swept away by the waters of the flood. The next paragraph. Eventually, Prasant reached his village, Kalikuda. His heart went cold. Where their home once stood, there were only remnants of its roof. Some of their belongings were cut, mangled, and twisted in the branches of trees just visible above the dark waters. Young Prasant decided to go to the Red Cross shelter to look for his family. Explanation. At last, Prasant reached his village. The name of his village was Kalikuda. Kalikuda, Kalikuda. But he was depressed to see the scenes there, and he found that only the roof of their house was left. Some of their belongings were caught, mangled, and twisted in the branches of the trees. In other words, some of their belongings were blocked, not allowed to be swept away by the branches of the trees around their house. It was obvious that there was no one in that house. So Prasant decided to go to the Red Cross shelter. Now, students, what is a Red Cross shelter? Red Cross is an organization that is meant for helping those who are trapped. Red Cross is known for medical help more. However, its chief function is to help those people who are in need of help. It is, of course, an international organization, and there are many branches in many nations that come together to help people suffering in natural disasters or maybe in wars. So, students, let us stop here for today. Till now, we got to know that Prasant reached his village but could not find his family members and decided to go to find his family members in the Red Cross shelter where many people would be there who had lost everything in the flood. Thank you so much. Meet you in the next online class. Bye.